Hey, welcome back to the SNS College Football Podcast. This is the Week 12 episode or preview, I guess. If you haven't seen the any of the pods before, basically we're going to briefly recap Week 11 stuff, and then we're going to get into a conspiracy corner segment where we're going to talk about who possibly was the whistleblower in the Chase Young saga, which could be kind of funny. And then
You mean rat? It
yeah,
was the
right.
rat.
Yeah, pretty much. And then we'll get into the Week 12 premier games, which is going to be Georgia at Auburn, Minnesota at Iowa, and then Oklahoma at Baylor, followed up by our Week 12 bets. So let's get into some brief recaps. Addison, Minnesota at Penn State, pretty surprising result to some. I think to us on the pod it wasn't as surprising, but an outright win was certainly a little bit surprising, right?
Yeah, I definitely thought Minnesota had a chance to win, but the way they played, like they had a big lead, they let Penn State come back, in the second half, and then Penn State almost won the game at the end. But yeah, the way Minnesota controlled the game, I was definitely surprised by that. They continued to exceed expectations, as they go. So far in Big Ten play, they haven't played great teams, but they're winning big. And then this game, they finally play a good team, and they just continue to exceed expectations. So, credit to Minnesota. They did play well. I thought for most of the game, they were the better team. At the end, the stats kind of favor PSU a little bit, but I thought that most of the game, Minnesota was in control. So, I definitely give them credit. And, they definitely shot up quite a bit in the playoff rankings this week, which just came out, about an hour ago. So,
Right.
Huge win for Minnesota.
Yeah.
They got another one. They've got another. Every game for them is big now, so.
Yeah, when we get into their game, it's going to be interesting now that they are coming off of probably the biggest win for the program in a long time, right? I mean, I'm trying to remember back a game that's bigger than that they've won, but
I don't think they've had a bigger one like in our lifetime. Honestly.
Right. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how they respond after that, and tricky game for them coming up. But Tulman, what about Iowa and Wisconsin last week? That game I think kind of went stylistically pretty much about as straightforward as we thought it would be. But your thoughts on that game and anything else involving that, I guess.
Only thing that was surprising to me was Iowa had a couple of explosive plays. They were able to sustain a couple drives, which I didn't think they could do. And they scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. Otherwise, I felt that Wisconsin was the right side and really controlled the game like I thought they would.
Yeah, Iowa doing very Iowa-like things. And again, we'll get into that Minnesota-Iowa matchup coming up here. But Addison, I'll jump back to you. Iowa State and Oklahoma. So this game was kind of interesting. Oklahoma got out to a very fast start, obviously, and then Iowa State came kind of roaring back. Your thoughts on that game? And I was going to ask you both kind of your general thoughts on Oklahoma now compared to maybe like 4 weeks ago. And I know that includes a loss to Kansas State. But in my own recent recalibration of my system, Oklahoma's rating a little bit lower than what I think the general public has them. But Addison, give me your thoughts on that game real quick, and then maybe both of your guys' thoughts on Oklahoma.
Iowa State's a good team. We know that. But Oklahoma's slipping a little bit in terms of the teams that we think of as elite. In my mind, just the way, after the Kansas State game, and then this game, a game that they almost gave away at the end. And the fact that their defense is kind of reverting to what we've seen the last few years is definitely a concern. So I think Oklahoma, now that we're looking at a bunch of one-loss teams, for the fourth spot, they're falling behind a little bit if they continue to play this way.
Yeah, Tulman, your general thoughts on kind of same thing with Oklahoma?
Yeah, they just haven't seemed to be able to put teams away. I felt like Iowa State, even though they were down by 14 for a lot of the game. I felt like Iowa State was kind of always within a shot. Kind of the same thing against Texas. They were, for the most part, dominating them, but couldn't put them away. I think that's just because now we're more concerned about them giving up big explosive plays. So even if they're able to keep up pace with their scoring, like they have done all season, the defense just might not I think the defense can allow teams to hang around against them.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to talk about them later in the pod here with that big game at Oklahoma. And then the last game that we'll briefly recap, and I think we can spend just a little bit more time on this one since it was pretty much like the biggest game of the year so far. LSU going into Tuscaloosa and winning the game on the field. Tulman, your initial reaction to that game, and is Alabama in your mind? Is this going to be really tough for them to maybe get that fourth spot, or do you think it's going to be possibly a little easier than what you think?
Well, it was the best game of the year to watch. It was really exciting watching LSU jump out. Kind of like I thought. I thought they would have success offensively. I thought like they would have an answer to whatever Saban threw at them, and throughout the game, they just showed that they're not a one-dimensional team. They're not reliant on Joe Burrow's efficiency and explosiveness. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been outstanding for them, and just a big credit to Coach O's offensive staff about how they've kind of revolutionized the offense for them. As far as Alabama, I think that surprisingly their defense gave up some big plays, which we just haven't seen from them in the last several years. I think that they always seem to have, a guy at each level that you're scared of, right? They always seem to have like those
All-American
all
or
those
something.
guys that are in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
And they just don't. I thought this year it could have been Dylan Moses, but he's out for the year. So I think that they're still within striking distance to get into the top four. LSU I think would have to roll pretty hard from here on out. Beat potentially Georgia in the championship game, and then they can hope for one of the Pac-12 teams to falter. They're still ahead of Oklahoma. I think Penn State losing to Minnesota helped them, so I think they're still in the mix.
Okay. Addison, any kind of thoughts you had about the game, and then similar to what I asked, Tulman with Alabama, how tough is their path now, do you think?
I was surprised by some sloppiness we saw from Bama. It was kind of uncharacteristic of them. Like the first drive of the game, for example, I know Tua was a little bit rusty. He just fumbles the ball, like not even touched, costing them points. And then, there was the punt that slipped through the punter's hands. Their receivers dropped a lot of passes. They obviously made a lot of plays too, but there were just a lot of things that I thought were very uncharacteristic of Bama. They got in a big hole. Obviously, they came back. I don't know. I thought LSU was definitely the better team, coming away from it. But I do think Bama is one of the top four teams. I think at the end of the year, right now they're really well positioned. It's like the playoff ranking, they're fifth right now. I'm not surprised by that. Honestly, the way I see it, if I thought that if the Big 12 champ or the Pac-12 champ was close to Bama, I would give them the edge. But I actually think there's a big gap between Bama and those teams right now. So I do expect if Bama wins out, which I think they will, that they'll be in the top four.
Yeah, I have Alabama, I think, like 6 points better than all those teams. So I agree with that. I just think it's going to be one of those things at the end where, does the committee value like resume, like conference championship again, or are we talking about just eye test? And do we think Alabama's just a top 4 team? And by the end of the year, that could certainly be the case. I think that it'll be interesting to see. I didn't hear anything that was said tonight. I don't know how much they're going to take into consideration that Tua definitely was not quite healthy in that game. He was
that was the first thing that was said on that show.
okay.
It was the first, when it came out, it was like, well, Tua was hobbled.
Right.
So I get that Tua wasn't 100%, but I thought Bama did a poor job of game planning in the first half because LSU was getting after him, and it was obviously taking a bit of a toll. In the third quarter, when Bama started to come back, they really, relied heavily on Najee Harris, and that was when they were at their best. And I thought they should have been doing that earlier in the game.
Yeah, LSU, both LSU and Bama haven't been quite as elite up front this year as we're used to, and LSU's been, I think, getting a little bit better and improving. Bama's, I think, mostly as Tulman alluded to, missing 2 linebackers that were both hurt at the beginning of the year. So I think with these teams, you can run on them a little bit. And I am surprised that, like you said, Addison, that Bama didn't try to run a little bit more and protect Tua, but maybe they felt in the beginning that they were going to have to keep up with Burrow and company and kind of put Tua in harm's way. So, yeah, LSU, obviously a massive win. It's hard to imagine them not making the playoff now. Alabama still certainly in it, but much tougher road. So let's get into our Week 11 winners and losers. So, Tulman, winners or losers? Go ahead and start.
I'll start optimistic and go with the winners.
Okay.
So, in a pretty meaningless game, Ryan Day put on a coaching clinic in 2 special teams plays. I think he just purely wanted to show that he caught something on film, just to add some intrigue to the game. So, it was probably the best onside kick execution I've ever seen. Basically, a pass off the foot to Chris Olave, 10 to 15 yards from the kickoff spot, and then you're up 42-0 or something like that, and you call a timeout right before the second half, or right before the second quarter is about to end to go into halftime, because you thought that you'd get a punt block, and even though they didn't block the punt, the guy was right there, it just went through his hands. So I thought that was just a pure coaching clinic from Ryan Day. I loved the emotion from Coach O after the win. That was just really fun for LSU fans and people that I've lived with for, a decent amount of my life.
For sure.
Minnesota playmaking wide receivers that I love. Rashad Bateman, big play. Also 203 yards, 1 touchdown. Tyler Johnson, another big play, one-handed catch for a touchdown, 104 yards and 1 touchdown. And then finally, we'll give them credit this week. Tennessee is now on a 3-game win streak. They have won 4 out of their last 5. They were somewhat competitive against Alabama. They came back from 13 to beat Kentucky, and maybe they're a team that's trending up. Maybe Pruitt's righted the ship a little bit there.
Yeah, Tennessee making the winners list. That's always a surprise since they are pretty much like if you call it like a win-loss record, they're like 2-40 on this pod as far as winner to loser ratio. So I had Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, I think to the casual fan, they don't really know who this guy is. He's not the most talented LSU back that they've had in the last decade.
We talked about him in the preseason.
Yeah, we definitely.
He would be a key factor for them.
Yeah, he's a very, very pivotal part of what they do, and he played big for them in this game, and I think he did a great job out of the backfield catching the ball. He was a safety valve for Burrow. There was a couple key plays in the second half that he made that really kept drives going, as far as being a guy that Burrow could dump it off to. So he had a massive game. Addison, I might be stealing this one from you, I would imagine, but Illinois is bowl eligible. That's amazing that they came back and won that game, and they're now 6-4, right? So I mean that's kind of crazy for them. But those were my only 2 winners for the week. So Addison, go ahead with your winners, and then transition into your losers.
Okay, well, I actually have more winners than losers
That's
this week.
weird.
It was a good week of football. So,
Yeah.
I liked what I saw.
Right.
One of my winners is the 3:30 slate this past week. You had the LSU game going. Obviously, all eyes were on that. But I was also trying to watch like the other games that were going on at the same time on my phone and stuff. So I was watching the Wisconsin game. That got good at the end. The Illinois game got absolutely nuts at the end. So there was a lot of good football on at that time. That time slot. Like you said, Nick, Illinois, bowl eligible. I'll have the flip side of that in the losers, but another big winner, PJ Fleck. In Minnesota program in general. We've talked up PJ a lot the last few years, and things are just working out really well for them this year. And all the hype that we've kind of generated around PJ seems to he seems to be living up to that. So if they continue to do that, like he's just done an amazing job there. It seems like he's really raised the bar at Minnesota. Obviously, their biggest win in a really long time, and they've got even bigger games coming up. So if they can get to the Big Ten championship, that would be huge for them. Joe Burrow, I think everyone agrees that he pretty much locked up the Heisman at this point. I think the odds are now 1 to 9 that he wins the Heisman, so it's like pretty much a sure thing. And I mean, he really deserves it at this point. No one is really close. So barring some catastrophe, Joe Burrow is going to end up winning the Heisman. So, that does it for my winners. Then we'll move into the losers. First, I'll start with, this is actually something that we've done before, but the Pac-12 refs. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tulman, but they called a penalty. They called a penalty, but then they enforced it on the wrong team, and then they ended up suspending those refs for the next week. Am I right?
Yeah, just for the next week. Like, you should just be for the end of the year.
You should be fired. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much that's crazy that can even happen. We always joke about how the Pac-12 just seems to make up rules as they go.
Like, it can happen, but they would correct it. They just didn't correct it.
Yeah. There's just so much incompetence, and the Pac-12 it's ridiculous. I don't know how that happens, but the Pac-12, they at this point we should just expect it from their refs. Like every time we watch a Pac-12 game, if it's like Friday night, we're always like, what the fuck are these calls? Like, it's unreal. And so that's definitely a theme this year, and like pretty much every year too. But this is one of the biggest losers of the year, I think, is the performance Michigan State had in the fourth quarter. Credit to Illinois, getting the 6th win. And I've been a big fan of Illinois this year, obviously because I had their win total over. But Michigan State, I don't know how you blow that game, with a 25-point lead. With the defense you have, they did everything they could to just give that game away, and now they really need to consider firing D'Antonio. And I love D'Antonio. For Ohio State fans, D'Antonio was obviously a big part of us winning the 2002 national championship. I think he's a great defensive coach. He always has been. But right now, the program, this looks like the John L. Smith Michigan State team. The way they just lose games, and even the talent they have defensively, it doesn't even matter. They just give games away. Either they lose games because their offense can't do anything, and they did nothing in the offseason this past year to correct that, or they just like make stupid mistakes like they did in this past game, and they just end up losing. And like the program is not in a good spot right now. I think Michigan State fans are not happy, even though D'Antonio has done like a better job than any coach in our lifetime at Michigan State. But it's at the point where like they need to do something. It's either make him fire everyone on the offensive staff, or like he's gone. But even with that, like the way they lost the game was just like pure incompetence. Like there's no excuse for it. So I don't know. It seems like something needs to change in Michigan State.
Yeah, D'Antonio is definitely a loser of the year candidate. I think that program in general, they just their coaching staff is inept. I feel like the Jim Bowman's on the staff, for Christ's sakes. He's trash. We know that as OSU fans, so definitely a candidate. This week I've got
2019 Jim Bowman should not be a football coach.
Yeah, fact. Like, and the fact that he is it's a sign that D'Antonio is just too loyal to his guys. And I agree that I think it's time for him to go because of that. So this week I've got Northwestern. They lost to Purdue at home, and Purdue is playing a fourth-string walk-on quarterback. Northwestern is atrocious. They are favored by only 39.5 this week versus UMass, who anybody playing UMass should be favored by at least 50. So Northwestern's just terrible. Boston College, I don't remember why I had them on this list. Who did Boston College play? Why are they on my list?
Florida State.
Yeah, they lost to Florida State, who, you know what, maybe Florida State's better without Taggart, so maybe BC's not as much of a loser then. But
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah,
We don't have to worry about the Willie Taggart factor.
yeah. So maybe BC's actually, I don't know. It's not really a loser then, I guess. But James Franklin once again loses on the road to a ranked team, gets out coached, I think, a lot of the game. This is a story that's just never ending to me. This guy is just an overrated football coach, in my opinion. Penn State, I think, should have a few more big wins on their resume over the last few years, but I honestly think a lot of this is due to James Franklin. At one point, it was 4th and 1, and he decided to throw a fade. I don't know what the fuck he's doing half the time, so he is my loser coach for the week. Tulman,
He's like video game coaching. It's just like you don't even think about it. You'll just try things, and that totally works when you
play Rutgers.
You're like a dominant video game player,
Yeah.
and like you can win against the computer 45-0 every time, which is kind of like what it's like when he plays against inferior teams.
Right.
But in big games, there just doesn't seem to be a strategy, and situational football can be really bad for him.
Yeah, he's an idiot.
The fade never works in a goal-to-go situation.
Yeah. I don't get it. I don't understand. But Tulman, your losers, and then transition into that conspiracy corner.
So Arkansas lost 45-17 at home against Western Kentucky, and Chad Morris got fired. So that program is just in an embarrassing place right now. Not sure where they go from here. Maybe some rumors to like the NFL, like Dan Quinn from the Falcons. So we'll see where we go. But,
God, that would be just as Dan Quinn's a fucking trash coach. That would be terrible.
Yeah, that would be interesting. So really, nobody in the ACC is helping Clemson with their resume. I don't think Clemson needs it, but Wake Forest losing 35-17 against Virginia Tech just could have been a somewhat notable game this week where we talk about Clemson, but that's just not going to happen now. And finally, I guess we'll go ahead and transition into our conspiracy corner for the week, because the biggest loser of the week is the NCAA. They are punishing people for what I believe are to be good-natured actions. Any organization that penalizes a broke kid for, trying to get some help from their coach in the case of Penny Hardaway helping James Wiseman move, or trying to just pay for their girlfriend to come see them in the Rose Bowl, a special time for them. That's somewhat shameful. So NCAA, please modernize. But while we're on this topic, Chase Young is suspended, and that's pending investigation and appeals and whatnot. But I wanted to get everybody's take on who do we think the rat is that tattled on Chase.
I have a wild one. I had a few, but for the sake of time and letting you guys get in there, I'm gonna say that the person that is the rat is the person that you least suspect, and I'm gonna go with no other than Ohio State head coach Ryan Day. And the reason that I think that that is a possibility is that maybe Dayman feels like that OSU is just getting every person, in this city to pat them on the back, telling them this is the best OSU team ever. They're going to stomp the rest of these teams. We're going to win another national title. I felt like he needed something to kind of get that Ohio versus the world mentality back and get that edge back. And I feel like it's possible that he might have made, being the head football coach at Ohio State, you have a lot of power in the state of Ohio. And you're going to, naturally make some connections even outside of the state. I wouldn't be shocked if he made a call with the understanding that he knew that Chase would not be out for the season or anything like that. But maybe just perhaps these two cupcake games makes the call, gets him out of there, and then all of a sudden, once again, it's, the NCAA is trying to ruin us. Somebody ratted out, Chase Young for doing, as you said, Tulman, a good-natured thing, and maybe now he's got these guys, maybe there's a little bit of a fire lit under their ass to where they might beat Rutgers by like 500 points now. But yeah, Ryan Day just trying to get the troops rallied again, and got him as the rat. Addison, do you have a possible rat or whistleblower in this sense?
Yeah, I have one. Something I've seen rumors about. Could be a guy by the name of Elijah Brooks. He was Chase Young's high school football coach at DeMatha, which of course is in Maryland. So when Mike Loxley went to the Maryland staff, he brought in Elijah Brooks. Obviously a good move, if Maryland's going to be good, they need that DeMatha pipeline. It's a Maryland powerhouse. They produce guys like Chase Young, obviously big-time program.
Right.
So obviously he would know, those kind of connections. And then Maryland playing Ohio State this week, maybe he let something slip, that Chase Young had this, relationship with a guy that lent him some money, gets him suspended, just being petty. I don't know what, just doesn't want to play or something. Obviously, Maryland's not going to beat us. But, Chase Young ends up not playing. And then the way the game played out, it seemed like we, at least in the first half, were taking no mercy with the onside kick in the first quarter. At the end of the second quarter, we're calling timeouts, trying to block a punt at the end of the half. At the end of the game, DeAndre Jones, who is now a Maryland linebacker, who was a transfer from Ohio State, there was like a scene at the end of the game where he was like huddled up with a bunch of OSU players because they're still friends. And apparently people were saying that there was like they caught video of like the OSU players saying like, "Why'd you guys snitch on us?" or something along those lines. So a lot of this is just obviously rumors, that kind of stuff, but it definitely could have come from, the Maryland camp.
Addison, to that point, I was at that game, and going back to what Tulman said about Day putting on a coaching clinic, maybe Day kind of had an idea of who it was, and that's why he's running onside kicks up 21-0 in the second quarter. So
right, yeah. I was thinking, like, is Is he trying to send a message? Is he trying to run up the score on these guys? And another thing, like this could be totally unrelated, but Maryland has lost 2 commits since that game, and I think one of them was a DeMatha guy. So if it came out that your old high school coach would rat like that,
yeah,
would that make you not want to go to the where that guy is coaching?
yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely a lot to that. So, Tulman, I know you got some probably wild shit that you want to say, so go for it.
James Franklin did it because it just seems like something that motherfucker would do.
Yeah, he just sucks at life, man. I can't.
Yeah, it seems like he'd do that.
Yeah.
Craziest one that I came up with was that Chase Young or someone from the Chase Young camp ratted on himself could provide, knowing that a potential suspension would be coming. If you care more about your NFL draft status, and he's definitely going in the top 3, could provide you an easy way out for the season to go ahead and preserve your top draft status. But to be honest, I believe in Chase Young as a leader, and I think he's the best college football player I've seen this year. So, just message to the NCAA: have a good business model. Let's put your best product out there. Let's put your best players out there, and let's set a precedent for people who I believe are doing good deeds. Let's not penalize them for good-natured things.
Yeah. NCAA.
Like along these lines about Chase Young is, from what I hear about him, like he's a good kid. Like he didn't mean anything bad, obviously, from this whole situation. Obviously, I don't know him personally, but I hear good things about him. I don't think he's a bad kid. Obviously, I think the NCAA, a lot of the rules are just bullshit anyway. So I want to see the best players play anyway. So hopefully it just gets resolved soon. I've heard that it could be this week, before the next game. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the NCAA just sucks ass. I mean, I think a lot of these kids, maybe even most of them, don't mean any ill will. I think they're just trying to do things that you would normally do outside of the NCAA organization. And, if the NCAA can somehow make money off of, these kids getting in trouble or whatever the case may be, I just feel like the NCAA is so archaic as an organization. It's truly... I was thinking about this earlier today, and I was about to say I was planning on the pod to say that it's the worst sports affiliated organization like ever in the world, but it's not. FIFA is, and then NCAA, yeah. So
yeah, FIFA's worse. Like
FIFA's atrocious. They let Qatar get the World Cup and use slave labor to build stadiums. FIFA's dog shit.
Yeah.
Totally dying building their stadium.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Swindled podcast. There was this that talks about just people in society getting conned by other people or organizations. There's an episode on FIFA that's takes a deep dive into how fucked up FIFA is. So check that out if
I will. Yeah. No,
in Swindled.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So shout out to the Swindled podcast. All right, so that'll wrap up this week's Conspiracy Corner. Obviously, Chase Young, he's a freak and a good guy. He deserves to play. So we'll move on to our Week 12 games, and we're going to start with possibly the biggest one. Georgia is going to Auburn. Right now, I believe Georgia is a 3-point favorite. If they win this game, they clinch the SEC East. Addison, I'll start with you. Give you kind of a softball here because I know you have a really good idea of what Georgia's going to look like when they do have the ball on offense. But what are, for a casual fan that's watching our pod for the first time, what are they going to see from Georgia when they have the ball? And are they going to find success often enough to, put themselves in a position to win this game against Auburn?
Well, Auburn, I believe, is coming off a bye, right?
They are.
Yeah, coming off a bye. I think, obviously, they're going to try and stop Georgia's running game. I think that there's a good chance they'll be able to have decent success doing that. Force Georgia into what we've criticized all year, which is their passing game. I think I definitely think that Auburn's got a chance to win this game. Um, I think Auburn's got the best defense they're right up there with Georgia as far as best defenses in the SEC. I think Auburn's is better. They create more havoc. So I do really like Auburn in this matchup defensively. So they'll definitely keep them in the game and give them an opportunity to win.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that Auburn is definitely going to focus on stopping Swift and Harrion, and they're going to put the Georgia offensive staff to the test. I think Fromm is not the issue. I think the issue is that they keep him kind of caged up, and part of it is that their receivers are not elite. We've covered this over and over. Cager's good. He's not great. The rest of the receivers are very talented, but they're very young and they're not quite ready for big-time SEC football, I think. So I think Georgia's going to have some major issues really finding like a lot of success against this Auburn defense. But Tulman, we'll flip to...
Random thought.
Yeah.
Mecole Hardman is really fast. I'm just thinking that because watching the Chiefs this past weekend.
Yep.
Like that one touchdown he had. Like,
they're missing that.
Georgia is lacking this year. That guy had elite speed.
Yeah.
And they just don't have those kind of playmakers, I think. Like, they had to bring in a couple of transfer receivers because they didn't have that, Like, I think they've got good young talent, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, totally agree. Tulman, Bo Nix season, offense. What's the casual fan going to see when Auburn has the ball in this game?
So Auburn 48th in standard down line yards against Georgia, 17th in standard down line yards defensively. So you can envision a scenario where Auburn, their offense is predicated on staying ahead of the sticks and avoiding getting Bo Nix into tough situations. Bo Nix has not been great early, but he has shown the ability to heat up towards the end of games, make some big plays with both his arm and his feet. Auburn is great in short yardage situations, and Georgia is bad in short yardage situations. So if Auburn can stay ahead of the sticks, they can convert on some third downs, short yard situations, and maybe keep some drives alive. I think the key here is Auburn not great explosive metrics. So Gus Malzahn, as usual, is going to have to be creative offensively for Auburn to stay in the game against Georgia. Georgia's defense is 119th in rushing on passing downs, which indicates to me that they're susceptible to some quarterback scrambles. That's a strength of Bo Nix. So if Bo Nix can keep some plays alive, get some yardage on third down, I could see Auburn having some offensive success against Georgia.
Yeah, so I bet Auburn because I think this game should be actually closer to a pick-em based on what I've got in my own ratings. You guys covered it all really well, and I agree, Tulman, that I think Nix will be able to make some plays with his legs. There's going to be some good-on-good stuff going on as far as like when these teams are in the red zone, but I feel like Gus, with an extra week of prep, is going to scheme some stuff to be ready for Georgia and their defense. I just don't trust Georgia's offensive staff enough in this type of situation, and it's a shame if you're a Georgia fan because I think they have enough talent to possibly be a playoff team. I think they're lacking a little bit at receiver, like we said, to maybe be a true national title team this year. I actually think Auburn's going to win this game. I think it's going to be a brutal, just defensive battle for the most part. But I do like Auburn at home, actually, with maybe a couple points of value there. Tulman, as far as the numbers concerned, which way would you lean there?
I guess I'd lean Georgia.
Okay.
Don't feel strongly about the number. Something that kind of jumped out to me, Auburn gets to the quarterback, but they're only 61st in sack rate. So I can see, I can see Georgia. I can see them not, creating negative plays for Georgia. So, but these are two really good defensive teams. So I see each team maybe moving the ball a little bit, but I see some drive stalling out. So I actually feel better about the under, which I got at 45.
Yeah, no, I mean that's something. Obviously, I think as far as the total is concerned, I feel like we would lean definitely under there. But Addison, as far as same thing against the number. Which do you have a lean, perhaps?
Yeah, my lean's Auburn.
Okay.
I think that. Well, I like Gus. I definitely think that Auburn has the coaching edge here, and coming off a bye, playing at home, I would definitely take the points. I think Georgia will play into Auburn's hands a little bit offensively. I think that Gus can, scheme some things up to get them some explosive plays offensively. So, I would definitely take Auburn, if anything.
Okay.
I agree with Tulman that it's probably going to be a low-scoring game.
Yeah, I can't imagine these teams getting into a shootout. I think Georgia's coaches will prevent themselves from that, and I don't trust Nick's quite enough yet in that Auburn offense as a whole to really be able to generate a whole lot against what is a very sound Georgia defense. They do not really let up a lot of explosive plays. So we'll move on to what I think is actually a pretty interesting game in the Big Ten West now that Minnesota, obviously, we covered them. Biggest win maybe in our lifetimes as far as their program's concerned, beating Penn State, vaulting all the way up to number 8 in the current college football top 25 rankings. They're going to Iowa, and they're getting points. And, I think to the casual fan, they would think to themselves, why the hell is Iowa favored in this game? But it kind of just shows that I think Vegas is not quite sold maybe on Minnesota yet. Tulman, I'll start with you, and I'll let you pick which team, as far as what we're going to see whenever one of these guys is on offense.
I guess we'll go good on good when Minnesota has the ball.
Okay.
So one of my favorite things to talk about right now is Minnesota's playmaking wide receivers. Just absolutely love them. Minnesota's 4th in explosive passing rate. They are 5th in drives that end in a touchdown rate. They're a fantastic red zone team, and they also sustain drives. They are 12th in the country in third down rate. Look, their strength is an explosive offense, downfield passing, big plays to those wide receivers, and that's also Iowa's strength defensively. They are 11th defending explosive passes. But surprisingly, they're only 60th in adjusted line yards defensively. Minnesota also mediocre, 44th. So to me, I think I could see Iowa canceling out some of Minnesota's big explosive plays and making them sustain drives. Minnesota has a good stable of running backs, but they haven't been productive, with most of them averaging just around 4 yards a carry.
Yeah, I found the most interesting matchup in this game is both teams and their red zone offenses and defenses. So as far as when Minnesota has the ball, they're top 5 in the country in red zone TD percentage. Iowa is 8th in red zone defensive TD percentage. So, that's where I think a big part of this game is, as far as like the deciding factor possibly, is when Iowa's in the red zone. If when Minnesota's in the red zone, if they can go ahead and get touchdowns against Iowa, that could be the way that they end up winning this football game. I think that's possibly the case on the other side, and we'll get to that in a minute when Addison talks about when Iowa has the ball themselves. But I agree, Tulman. I mean, this is going to be interesting also to see this explosive Minnesota offense against an Iowa defense that just simply doesn't give up explosive plays. So something's going to have to give, and whichever team wins that type or that part of the game, that's going to go a long ways, I think, in deciding the game. But Addison, let's talk about that boring ass Iowa offense. Where do you think they're going to find, or how are they going to find success in this game against Minnesota?
Well, just Minnesota obviously playing the best offense they had played all season last week. Based on that game, Sean Clifford, pretty volatile performance. He put up a ton of yards, low completion percentage, so it wasn't very efficient. He had 3 picks, but Penn State still found they generated a lot of offense through the air.
Right.
Nate Stanley hasn't had a great year. He's been up and down himself too. Michigan. Well, they took a lot of sacks in that game. He was under a ton of pressure, had a horrible game. I don't think it's going to be like that for them this game. I think he'll have time. I think Iowa will have their moments through the air. Iowa's receivers have kind of grown on me as the year's gone on. They kind of pick their spots. They're not great, but they can make plays here and there. Like you saw it last week, that 75-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter of the Wisconsin game where they almost tied it up. Plays like that, I think that they'll have some success here and there through the air. Minnesota's actually, they're solid defensively. They're probably better than people think, but they also haven't played a lot of good offenses this year. So I think those numbers are probably a little bit padded. So with that said, I think Iowa will be able to, generate a little bit, more than what we've seen when they play Penn State or Michigan. Minnesota is not as good as those teams defensively, so I think we'll see more from Iowa. In these big spots for Iowa, they've really struggled to finish drives. That's what they need to do. They need to get touchdowns instead of settling for field goals. They need to limit the turnovers. Those are the things that have really killed them in these big games. So yeah, I was going to give my concluding thoughts on the game, but we'll save that for the end.
Okay, yeah. So that's a good transition point, though. Is that talking about Iowa not finishing drives? They are ranked 74th in the country in red zone TD percentage. The good thing for them, though, is Minnesota is very, very poor defensively in the red zone. Otherwise, efficiency-wise, havoc. Minnesota's actually top 25 team, pretty much collectively in those categories. Red zone defensive TD percentage, though, so teams basically finishing drives on Minnesota's defense, they're ranked 119th. If Iowa were to find success against one of these Big Ten West schools in a matchup like this, it would be Minnesota. So that's going to be interesting to see if Iowa can actually finish a drive, or if Minnesota, if they are playing the right team finally to where they can, get some stops and force some field goal attempts. As far as against the number, Addison, I believe it is at 3 right now. Which way would you lean?
I'm not super confident in this, but I would lean Iowa. We've seen Iowa play well in this spot before, where they're a home underdog. It's a huge game late in the year. But the flip side of that is Minnesota has, they've exceeded expectations all year. Even though they haven't played great teams all year, they've covered in 6 straight games, and they've covered those games by an average of 2 touchdowns per game. So people are definitely underestimating Minnesota. For example, I thought that they would lose last week, even though I picked them to cover.
Right.
So it could be the case again this week. It seems like kind of a coin flip for me. I would lean Iowa, but I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota ends up pulling this off again.
Yeah. Tulman, your lean against the number?
Yeah, I'm thinking about taking Iowa officially. Just looking at Minnesota's schedule, Minnesota has not played a team stylistically similar to Iowa. All their games have been against, more spread offenses, kind of, I'd call more finesse teams. So I just think it's something that Minnesota hasn't quite seen this year. I feel like it could throw them off in some areas of the game. Iowa does that to you sometimes, and I just feel like this could be a good spot for Iowa at home.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think Tolman, I totally agree with that as far as who they face stylistically. So, Minnesota's ranked 70th in as far as like a composite defensive line ranking that I put together, and Iowa offensively, or their offensive line, it's only at 59th, but keep in mind they have played some really good defenses this year, and I think with how they want to play, they might be able to find some success with their ball control offense. I as far as like the number, I mean I personally have the game closer to pick 'em if it's in Kinnick, but I think the number's right because we have to factor in that Minnesota just came off a huge emotional high, and now they got to travel to Kinnick to play a team that likes to play physical. I think a big factor in this is Iowa is definitely the better team as far as special teams. I have them, SP Plus has them 23rd as far as their special teams ranking or efficiency. Minnesota only 92nd. So as far as flipping the field, being a little bit more sound, covering kicks, and the kicking game itself, in a game with a line this low, and with Minnesota coming off that emotional high, I like Iowa to win the game, and I do like them probably to cover that number. I think it's close. I don't feel confident enough to put a bet in, I think. But I think we all agree Iowa, when the casual fan I think would probably say Minnesota for sure. Let's go ahead and move on to our last game before we get into our bets. We got Oklahoma at Baylor. And, kind of an interesting spot, I think, guys, just because Baylor is undefeated. If they win this game, we're going to have to start seriously talking about them in the college football playoff. But Oklahoma with a chance to get another big win to maybe vault themselves back up into, I guess, better perceived team as far as the committee is concerned, playoff-wise. But Addison, I'll start with you, and I'll let you pick with who has the ball here.
All right. Well, I'll go with Baylor offense.
Okay.
For Oklahoma defense. Right now it seems like weakness on weakness. Just the way they've been playing recently. We touched on Oklahoma defensively has not been good past couple games. Baylor has not either. This past weekend, that game against TCU, very ugly offensively. Like it went into OT, at 9-9.
Yeah.
And then their game before that against West Virginia, another ugly game. And that was right after we had started to talk up Baylor as a legitimate playoff team. They haven't played well since then. So I think Baylor's offense and Oklahoma's defense both have been trending down the past few weeks. So it's going to be interesting. I think that Baylor has the talent offensively to, regain their footing and, find some success offensively against this Oklahoma defense the way they've been playing. Like TCU, they're usually solid defensively. So, I think honestly, the way that I picked this game, I think Baylor gets back on track offensively and is able to, produce some yards offensively. Whether it's good enough to win the game, I'm not sure about that. But I think they'll be able to put up some points.
Yeah, I didn't know this before I think I saw it yesterday, but they've been down to starting offensive linemen the last couple of weeks, and I believe they're both back. Or one of them might have played last week, but he was very banged up. So I believe their starting five is intact, and I think that obviously should help. The one thing Baylor's got going for them is that they are a very explosive offense, even if their offensive line's not been playing very well recently. Oklahoma's one main glaring weakness, once again, that's coming to fruition this year is the fact that beginning of the year, you could gash them on the ground, and we knew that, and you still can. They rank super, super low in rush explosives as far as, giving those up. But now they're starting to give up some passing plays as well. And Baylor, as we saw against Oklahoma State, a couple other games they were in, they can get you pretty quickly. So As you
Yeah,
said,
Nick,
Addison.
one more point
Go
on the
ahead.
Oklahoma defense. They are shockingly bad at creating turnovers, which is surprising because they are better. They're a ton better at producing havoc this year.
Yeah.
But it hasn't transferred into creating turnovers.
Yeah, it's. I think it's been a lot of like tackles for losses, and not as much turnovers. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like we said, it might be a little week on week stuff. I'll be curious to see if Baylor's offensive line holds up against what is a very good Oklahoma defensive line metrically. But Tulman, we will switch to when Jalen Hurts and company are on the field. Do you expect to see a lot of points? No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Ask the question.
No, you're good. Just give me what we're going to see from Oklahoma.
Yeah, I feel like I always get when Oklahoma has the ball, and I like start off with the same thing every time. Oklahoma is the number one ranked explosive offense, and they are 14th in the country on third down conversion rate. So if you're going to get explosive plays, they are going to sustain drives. Really, the only time that Oklahoma is not good is when they are turning the ball over, and Jalen Hurts has been guilty of that in two of their big games and some of their close calls. Happened against Texas in the red zone, and it happened against Iowa State in the fourth quarter. He also had some near misses that should have been picks last week against Iowa State. So really, I think turnovers is the biggest cause for concern for Oklahoma offensively. Baylor, they are second in defensively not allowing explosive passing plays, and 22nd in not allowing rushing explosives. So there is the potential there to prevent Oklahoma explosives, but I do see Oklahoma overpowering that. I think that they're going to have to make Oklahoma sustain drives. They're only okay in the red zone, so I just don't see a great chance of Baylor stopping this Oklahoma offense unless they can capitalize on some turnovers. They are 15th defensively in turnover rate.
Yeah, I think I know you and I are sort of on opposite sides. Like you have Oklahoma at 8.5, right?
Yeah. So just going back to Addison's point, I think Addison bet Baylor or leans Baylor because he feels Baylor's going to get themselves corrected offensively. I think that Oklahoma is going to get themselves corrected defensively. So I kind of feel the other way, and I think Baylor just has a chance to falter. They've been really sloppy lately. I don't see them getting it right this game. Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the other side at 10. I do think it is important that they aren't allowing a lot of explosives this year. I think one spot in particular that I like about them is that Baylor's red zone defense is actually rated pretty high. Oklahoma's red zone defense is not very good. So if Baylor can get a touchdown to Oklahoma's field goal at some point, I think that's where they keep it kind of within the number. I do not think that Baylor wins the game. I think they could, but I see Oklahoma winning this game by about a touchdown, and that's why I have Baylor at 10. So, Addison, your lean against the number at 10?
I would say Baylor.
Okay.
Yeah, that's based on the way Oklahoma's played recently. Baylor at home, big game. Like, I think Oklahoma wins, but if you're giving me 10 points, I'll take that. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. We'll get into that with our picks. But, yeah, I'm definitely leaning Baylor. I don't feel, great about it, but, yeah, that's the way I would lean.
Okay, yeah, that's a good transition, actually. If you just want to just get right into your picks then, and that's how we'll end up the pod today.
All right, well, I got UNC early at +6, and that's gone down to +4. So they're playing Pitt. Pitt, obviously not a good offensive team. So ACC Wheel of Destiny, if I can get any team +6 in that division, I'm usually going to take it.
Addison, I got a really good nugget for you on that game because I also got that.
So, all right.
Yeah, so North Carolina has only been involved in one game this year where the outcome's been decided by 7 or more points. They won 35-22 against Georgia Tech. So
Yeah.
That's a huge nugget. I love it.
Yeah. Any other bets you like, Addison?
Wisconsin minus 13 against Nebraska. That's up to 14.5 now from what I last saw. Here's another game where Nebraska's a soft team. I expect Wisconsin to dominate them. Even though it's at Nebraska, this is a series that Wisconsin has thoroughly dominated this, ever since Nebraska's been in the Big Ten. So I expect that to continue. I've also got Bama minus 20.5. I think that's gone up by a point now. I think it's above 21. Here's the thing. Alabama at Mississippi State. Alabama is going to be looking to run up the score in this game. Given that they now have a loss, they need to look like the best one-loss team. I expect Bama to try and pour it on. Tua has he's still gimpy, but Mississippi State is not great at getting at the passer. So I don't think that will be a factor. I think Tua will have time. Bama will be able to put up a lot of points. Bama covers. So moving on, the OU Baylor game that we talked about, I have the over at 67.5. This is not a lot of analysis in it. I just think that there's going to be a lot of points. So there, I don't really care. It's one of those games. It's just totally on feel.
Right.
I feel like it's going to be like a 42 to 35 type game. I think that Baylor's going to be able to score. Oklahoma's not going to score under 40. So 67.5, that definitely seems low to me. So I'll take the over there. And then, a lot of these plays actually are kind of unorthodox for what I usually do, and especially the last one. I've got Minnesota, Iowa over 44.5. I've won quite a few bets this year taking Iowa under. It's been very profitable. But in this game, I think both offenses are going to be able to – so Iowa's defense, for example, this is the best offense they've played this year. Iowa offensively, Minnesota's defense is worse than Penn State or Michigan. They're gonna be able to find more offensively. I think that this game is. I think Minnesota at least gets in the 20s, and I think Iowa wins the game. So I think that this game is gonna end up over 45.
Okay, yeah. Tulman, some of your more confident picks.
Sure. I came up with actually two best bets this week. I got Tulane -3 at Temple. That line has moved all the way up. Tulane giving 6 to Temple. Typically, I like Temple at home in a situation like this, but taking a deeper look into Temple, they have been pretty poor defensively against teams ranked in the top 25 in the S&P Plus in offensive efficiency. Tulane is one of those teams ranking 12th. I think that there's some shock potential there for the Green Wave up in Philadelphia. I also like Navy. I got them getting 10.5 against Notre Dame. Just Notre Dame's run defense, I feel like, could be susceptible to the Navy triple option. They are they're 64th in the country in rushing defensive efficiency. They have a very, very low stuff rate. I see Navy exploiting some things against Notre Dame's rush defense. Also, another interesting nugget. Navy has been to the red zone 29 times. They have scored 26 touchdowns. So I can actually envision Navy winning on the field against Notre Dame. And then finally, don't bet the Eastern Michigan Akron under. I think this is the first time that we've done a podcast and we're already 0-1 on the week. So,
Yep.
spoiler alert, Akron scored 2 touchdowns, and they scored 1 touchdown with a minute left to blow the under, so fuck that.
Yep, that was just great. Totally agree on Navy Tulman for all the reasons you said. I think they're going to have their way on the ground versus Notre Dame's rush defense. Notre Dame has a horrendous red zone defense as well. And as you said, Tulman Navy has probably the best red zone offense, I believe, as far as punching the ball in for touchdowns. Navy also defensively creates a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and I think Book's going to be a little susceptible to that. This is a game Notre Dame's got to be careful. They better be ready to play because I do think Navy can win this game on the field. But I'm very happy getting any kind of 0.7 plus with them.
One more thing on Notre Dame too. I think that in this, like, some of these late season games for Notre Dame in seasons where they're totally out of it, they just have like nothing to play for.
Yeah.
You know, and they seem to, like, sometimes they seem to just kind of coast the rest of the way. So, you know, for all the reasons you mentioned and that, yeah, I might end up taking Navy as well.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm sure once Steele listens to this, he'll be thrilled about that, and then probably just spite.
He probably agrees too.
Yeah, he might spite bet Notre Dame, but I think he's a little he gets a little cautious when they play Navy, so it'd be interesting to see what he says. But I'll give just one more. This might be the best bet. I'm not sure yet. I need to dig into some other games. I love Iowa State at home this weekend against Texas. Texas is definitely healthier. They're getting healthier on defense. They're still missing a lot of players, though. Iowa State, a very underrated team in my eyes. The one thing that's held Iowa State back this year is they've had a few pant-shitting moments that instead of 5-4, they could very easily be arguably 8-1. In my own system, I mean, I have them as like I think the 12th best team in the country right now. They're just very solid across the board. Offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency. Their line plays very solid. They create explosives through the air. They also prevent explosives both against the rush and the pass. They're very solid in the red zone. We obviously think a lot of Matt Campbell. Addison, kind of, I think this is similar to what you were talking about, where Texas, with the whole like we're back bullshit after they beat Georgia, the fact that they lost to LSU, the fact that they've lost a couple other games, I think a lot of Texas's goals that they had, and by a lot, I mean all of them, are now not really reachable, I believe. For a program like Iowa State, though, to be able to say that, you know, you beat what I think is perceived as a blue blood like Texas, I think that's a pretty big deal. Jack Trice Stadium is a very underrated place to play at as well. That crowd gets kind of rowdy. So I
just want to comment on that bet too. Like,
sure.
Iowa State, like, it seems like the line is telling you to take them.
Yeah.
Like, they're a 5-4 team, but they're way better than that record indicates. Like, it seems like they lose every single coin flip game, you know. And like you said, they're power rated a lot higher than you would think they are.
Yeah, I have them personally 8 points better than Texas on a neutral field. So gladly am going to give 6.5 at that point. And I believe that line is maybe 7 now, with the juice kind of telling you that maybe Iowa State is the right side at this point. But yeah, like I said, could be a best bet. I do have the most amount of money on that right now. Otherwise, though, if you guys are watching for the first time, just check in the description box below. You'll get our up-to-date records against the spread, as well as our Week 12 bets. Tulman, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, 3 weeks left in the regular season, and we will not be talking about the ACC or the Pac-12 for the rest of the regular season. We will not be previewing any of those games. Clemson is the only ranked ACC team in the college football playoff. Oregon and Utah are the only ranked Pac-12 teams in the college football playoff. The Utes play UCLA, Arizona, Colorado down the stretch. Oregon plays Arizona, Arizona State, Oregon State down the stretch. kind of two irrelevant Power 5 conferences for the rest of the regular season, which I find interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Addison, any final thoughts?
Well, just to Tulman's point, Clemson better not lose, and the Pac-12 teams, they better win very decisively. Going into the Pac-12 championship game, if those teams won't have a chance.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because I agree with you guys that even though it's supposed to be about this year and only this year, it's going to be hard for the committee to not consider the fact that Alabama's always been in the playoff and it's Alabama. So that will be interesting at the end of the year. But
well, I think that Bama clearly gets some favoritism,
Yeah. Yeah. So
obviously they're really good and probably deserving of it, but they obviously get the benefit of the doubt. So
right.
and they're ahead of those teams already. So the other teams, they definitely have some ground to make up.
For sure. Okay, so as I said, check our bets out below, guys. If you have any comments or anything, put them in the comment section, obviously, and we will see you next week for another episode.